Hey, I got a question for you. When was the last time that you had a game night? Like an honest-to-God game night. You got all your friends together, your loved ones, maybe your family or your significant other. You put everything aside and just enjoyed each other's company over a tabletop game. If the answer to this question is far too long ago or never, then that's something you should absolutely remedy. In today's society, we're totally consumed by our screens and our devices. We work on them, we play on them, we communicate on them, and they have aided us in so many great ways. But unfortunately, those same devices that serve our online world sort of chip away at our offline worlds. We're social creatures. We as humans, we seek that face-to-face interaction, that human engagement, the warm bodies. And tabletop gaming is an absolutely incredible way to sort of fulfill those needs and to have a really great time. Luckily, there's Gamebox Monthly. You see, Gamebox Monthly scours the world and curates super unique indie tabletop games and sends them right to your door every month. The sort of stuff that you may never discover otherwise. And there are tabletop games for literally everybody, whether you are a couple, whether you're a raucous game night group of adults who enjoy bluffing and lying to each other all in the name of fun, or if you're families who are doing like weekly game nights in order to kind of reconnect and maybe grow together. It really is an all-inclusive activity for literally everybody. So let's get together and let's put down our phones and let's figure out what millions of people already know. We are in the middle of a tabletop gaming renaissance, and discovering games is an incredible way to rediscover each other and re-engage your original social network. Go to www.gameboxmonthly.com and rediscover social. Hello, yes, let's talk about it indeed. Welcome back to yet another episode of Elaborate. As always, I'm your host, Jake Lloyd. RedCrossBlood.org, InternationalMedicalCorps.org. That's Corps, C-O-R-P-S. These people, I guarantee you, still need our help. My guest this week, he's an incredibly talented actor, producer, and director of both stage and screen. He can be seen in the Academy Award-nominated movie Embrace of the Serpent. It's Brionne Davis on the couch this week. How's it going, Brionne?
Hey, good. Jake, how are you?
Not too bad. I met you a really long time ago on a random shoot in the middle of the desert.
Yes.
At this beautiful place called White Horse Ranch. I'll never forget the name of it because I've always wanted to go back and shoot something there.
I'm glad you didn't forget the name of it. But yeah, no, it's an incredible location. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, this Russian guy and his wife built like 3 square blocks of an old Western town. And we did some short film or something there, and we spent the whole day just kind of knocking around in costume, taking pictures.
Yeah, I think that film ended up being I think it was supposed to be a series, and then they made it into a feature, and I can't remember the name of it.
Where it landed, yeah, I can't
probably.
But it was a long time ago.
Yeah,
and I haven't really seen you much since.
Right.
But I invited you on the show for a few reasons. One, I'd like to get to know you better.
Sure.
You seem like an interesting fellow. I feel like the work that you put out there is always filled with a decent amount of integrity, obviously a lot of talent behind it. Also, I feel like you have a really wide range of the things of like who I see you being on screen and even off screen. But yeah, where did you come from originally?
Born in Dallas, Texas.
So you're a Texas boy.
Yeah, raised in Paris, Texas. Movie by Sam Shepard.
Right, yeah.
R.I.P. And then Austin is where most of my family lives now. And I went to New York. I studied in New York at the HB Actors Studio for a few years, and then went right back to Austin. Got my feet in the film industry.
Gotcha.
And then
did you go to school to become an actor? Did you always want to be an actor?
Yeah, I went to college at a private Christian university in Arkansas.
Oh,
but by pushing of my father to do business finance at a Christian college.
Did you know, like you knew pretty young what you wanted to do? You had an interest in the entertainment industry? And Dad wasn't into that?
It's not. They always supported, but
right.
He always
Practical.
thought I should have a plan B,
right.
and I didn't think that was worth.
And was the Christian college your idea, or was that a family thing?
It was a family thing. We were. I didn't really. Being from small town Paris, Texas, Juilliard wasn't something that was
Seemed
available, realistic,
right,
or I
It
always
seemed like something you hear about in film and television, but doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, it doesn't exist for small town,
Right.
underachieving academic student.
I mean, heck, I'm from Long Island, New York, and I could say the exact same thing. Like, it didn't seem like going and making a movie or being a TV actor. It didn't seem like a thing that actually happened.
Exactly, that's for somebody else,
right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But it was what I call the nugget of truth. That's kind of like lava inside my chest, inside of all of our chests. And I call it lava because that is this pulsating heat of purpose, and that's where our creative energy comes from, and that's where the truth is.
Right.
The truth of who we are, our life experiences, are individual to us.
Right.
So that truth.
I mean that we talk about that on the show quite a bit. I'd never heard it put that way, but I like that, the nugget of truth.
Yeah.
And you felt that pretty young?
Yeah, I was playing Tom Sawyer in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, I guess.
Right, whatever
it was called. But Tom Sawyer at the Paris Community Theater, and
at what age?
I think I was 9.
Oh wow,
that's what I say I was.
Right.
But 9 to 12, I guess.
Could have been a preteen or early teen.
But I made an entire audience laugh, and I didn't know, why.
Oh.
I was painting a fence, and they just started laughing. I turned around to them, and they started laughing more. And so I turned back around and continued to paint the fence, and they were just laughing.
Yeah.
And I realized in that, on stage there, that I could affect people for good.
Right.
And later I realized that you can make a living with it. And I've only recently realized that you could actually make a living doing it.
Yeah. Again, even as an adult working actor, it still seems like something that happens to other people.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So what did your parents do that they were like?
Well, my dad, I mean, look, my parents are, my father was an incredible human being.
He's no longer with us.
No, he died about, I think 11 years ago.
Oh, wow.
May 23rd, 2007, I think.
God, crazy. I think that 2007 was 11 years ago.
Crazy.
Absolutely crazy.
Insane.
Oh my goodness.
But I felt like, he was, the world was made up for him. He was 6'4", handsome, white, straight male, and just, the book was made.
Right.
The Bible was written for him.
Right.
And he never had to look inside himself to question anything.
Oh, understood.
And he was, from what I recall, pretty dogmatic when my parents first got together. My mom was Baptist, my dad was Church of Christ, and
okay.
Even in that,
Right.
there was some, some problems there. But my parents loved each other until the day my dad died, and my mom still lives in Austin, and she's a wonderful, incredibly strong human being. She's got rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh, jeez.
And she's had it since I was born.
Gotcha. How old? Like, if your father was around, so how old roughly are they?
My dad would be. He died at 59, so he'd be 69.
So he died quite young then.
Yeah.
And your mom is around the same age?
I think she's going on. Oh goodness. Late 60s.
Gotcha. So somewhere in there still.
Yeah.
What did your dad do for a living?
Real estate, insurance.
Gotcha.
And I usually say
so
insurance.
He was super practical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it must have been, especially the archetype that you have described, having a kid who's 9-10 years old into theater. That must have been like, this is a hobby, son.
Yeah, and it wasn't quite as, he saw me do, when I went to college, he saw me do theater all through high school, and music and vocal performance all through high school. And I was constantly not proving to him. I never tried to prove anything to him. It's just what I love to do.
Sure, yeah.
And then in college, I went to get a degree in business finance to kind of placate, I guess,
right.
The structure that we're supposed to fit inside of. But I spent all my time directing, they offered me a scholarship to do West Side Story.
Oh, wow.
And then I did another show, and then, and so I was spending all my time in the theater, and my grades suffered for it.
Right.
So I just left. I went to,
oh, wow.
I went to Austin.
Was there support there, or was that a struggle?
My dad had gotten a job offer in Austin, so they moved to Austin, And I tried to get in UT. I only tried once.
University of Texas?
University of
Gotcha.
Texas.
Where's that located?
Austin,
Oh,
Texas.
so it's gotcha.
Yeah. And I didn't get in the first semester that I tried, but I booked a play, I booked a commercial, I booked a film, all within that year.
Right,
so
yeah.
I thought, well,
So you did sort of hit the ground running as far as at least showing mom and dad, maybe more so dad might have been a little bit more resistant, even if he was, supportive. You hit the ground running, showing him like, oh, this is a thing that can be done, like that there's opportunity here. It's not like you were the kind of stereotypical, like, oh yeah, my son wants to be a rock star and he doesn't even have a band kind of thing, like.
Right. No, it was, I pretty much always did it.
Yeah.
And he didn't understand it, and nobody in my family is really an artist. So I kind of, yeah.
Where did it come from in you?
My
then,
brother's
so
a
young?
private investigator in Texas.
Oh, you and I, my brother's a police officer in Las Vegas. So it's like,
wow.
So it's like we have the exact same sort of, do you have any other siblings or just one brother?
Just the one older brother.
See, I have an older brother and then I have an older sister as well. I always say like one was a defense attorney, police officer, all these like very successful. I only could be an entertainer. That was the only lane that was left.
That's the only one left over, right?
Yeah, exactly. So where did it come from then when you were so young, that interest? Like where did you even get access to the theater if your parents weren't around you?
When I was a kid, my brother and I would put on little magic shows for the family, friends and family. My brother would do the magic and I would do all the direction and the costumes.
You planned it out.
And I was kind of his assistant, and but I was always the one to push to make it happen, right?
Right, of course.
And
you were
so
the one that
always,
was more excited about it.
Yeah, I think so. I think my brother enjoyed doing the magic, but he could have just done magic in his room. But I needed an audience.
Sure. Yeah. You needed the eyes on you. Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff were you watching, or were you like? I'm always interested to see what kind of television people were watching when they were younger, because I feel like that really drives the inspiration as far as where you ended up going. Like, what kind of art were you consuming as a little kid?
One of the first books I read all the way through was Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it sparked in me an imagination so really my stage was my imagination.
Sure.
We didn't have a lot of money, so I would write stories about how I would travel the world and go to all these amazing
you read like fictional biographies and stuff. Yeah.
And it was, my imagination worked to such a degree that I literally felt I would be transported there.
Wow.
And
like just by writing it, you had the experience. You had the life experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that really at the onset, I didn't have anything. I also enjoyed doing a lot of things individually, like individual sports. I'm a brown belt in Kimishin karate. Boy Scouts, I loved Boy Scouts. Hiking, camping. Any waterfront canoeing, rowing, stuff as a kid. Cross country, I was really good at running long distances, slowly.
But with the exception of maybe Boy Scouts on there, a lot of that stuff is really solo kind of stuff. I was also a Boy Scout as well.
Oh, yeah?
And I to this day, one of my biggest regrets was not finishing it. I was so close to making Eagle, and I quit because I was being bullied.
Oh, wow.
And I was
in Boy Scouts?
Yeah, I was given the choice between like Boy Scouts and baseball, and I was so happy because they were sort of conflicting. And I honestly might have chosen Boy Scouts over baseball had I not had the bullies in Boy Scouts. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go which is such a weird thing because you would think of those two.
The Boy Scouts is where the bullied go.
Right. And you would think like between like, for like a nerdy, Long Island kid, should I go play baseball with a bunch of jocks that I don't fit in with,
right,
or Boy Scouts? And believe it or not, I was more accepted into the baseball world than I was the other. But
I was not accepted. I
No?
was in the center field and doing like,
right. You were playing with the leaves and the
flowers
grass.
and looking for 4-leaf clovers.
Right. That's funny.
The ball's coming, huh?
Thwack. Yeah. How close in age is your brother to you?
He's 2 years older.
Oh, so you guys are pretty tight. Were you and him really
fought
tight?
Like,
oh, really?
Crazy. But it's interesting, that relationship, because no one could pick on me, but he could pick on me.
Oh, yeah,
and
I get that.
I
totally get that.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there
were your
your
brother would be the first one to kick somebody else's butt for messing with you, but he would also mess with you way worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he taught me how to defend myself physically, but he also, because of my, I wasn't a big kid. I was one of the smallest kids in my school. And
small in stature.
me and I think there were 2 girls that were the same size.
Oh,
and
wow.
we were all 3 the smallest, or there might have been another guy that was the same size as me, but we were all really small in my school, so I had to use my mouth to defend myself.
Wow, I just had that same conversation recently where I talked about how, like, yeah, when you're small, when you're diminutive in nature, and you're sort of the outcast as a kid, you learn that the way that you're going to get acceptance is by getting a reaction out of whatever it is you say.
Right.
And how that's great as a kid because you learn this incredible defense mechanism where it's like, if I can learn how to get a reaction that's not, getting punched or whatever,
right,
then that's a tool. But then when you grow up, you sort of have to learn how to shut that off because that could be very detrimental.
It was always a defense mechanism for me. It never was an offensive.
Right, of course.
So and luckily my brother kind of inadvertently taught me how to.
Of course,
do that.
Just by being physical with you.
Yeah,
you had to learn.
But I
remember
thrown in
the water to learn how to swim.
I remember
kind of
a time I was on top of him and I just started wailing and blood was flying everywhere, and I mean it was pretty intense.
Right. I didn't have the scales were tipped differently because my brother's 7 years older than I am.
I see.
So there was never a time where I was ever going to get one over. I can recall one time when I just gave him a swift kick to the junk, and it was the only.
And you ran.
It was honestly, it was the only time ever in the history that I can remember getting one over. Like that was the one notch on the Jake side of the Jake Craig scale.
Well, it seems like to me, if you were 7 years apart, that relationship should have been a bit more.
It was a little at first because he
embracive.
He left the house when I was only 6 or 7 and lived with his dad.
I see.
So when we were really little, it was that thing where I was just like you. If anybody on the block messed with Jake, they were like, "Oh shit, Craig's gonna kick your ass." Yeah. But when we were together, like brothers are, it doesn't matter how old he is. There's still, and when you're 7 years younger than him and you're getting into a fight, like he's doing that thing where he's holding your head back and you're so small your arms can't reach him.
Right. And you have to figure out another way to, and weeks later it would be payback from hell. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So was your brother wasn't into the same sort of artsy stuff, but he was a magician, you said, like in a cutesy,
that was a young
kid's
thing.
way. Yeah.
He dabbled in photography for a little bit and landscape painting. He did that. But he's a hero, man. Right, he really is. Has always been a hero, and he was a Texas State Trooper, and I have a lot of respect for him. We don't agree on a lot of things, but the love is there.
This is literally it's the exact same relationship I have with my brother. So let me ask you this question. It's come up on the show a bunch, and I feel like it is a recurring theme amongst creative types. You did mention it a little bit when you said that you liked doing solo things, like playing solo sports. Did you always see yourself as sort of an outsider? Even in your friends groups? Yeah,
it's. I think most artists are prefer wallflower, prefer introversion,
right?
And I certainly do. I'm lucky that I know when I'm called to be extroverted that I can step up to that plate.
You can turn it on.
Yeah, right? And it's not even. I don't know if it's even a turn on thing. It's just available to me and.
That's
but
fair.
If you give me a choice, I'd much rather be at home just reading a book or binging a Netflix show or something like that.
Consuming something creative
or writing or
making something creative.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like that's my balance all the time is I have to find the balance between creating and consuming, but I kind of need both. You can't have just one.
You do.
Just one is not healthy for anybody.
You have to absorb in order to
it's a give and
digest and then
So you think that something like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was a catalyst for you? You spawn this imagination. You discover the theater really young. Who like took you to like audition for that?
I think it was my mom. I think she found out somehow. I think that they were trying to figure me out.
Oh, right.
And my brother and I both had. I think it was the onset of, them labeling ADD.
Oh, right.
And she put me in karate, baseball, Boy Scouts, full-time school, cross-country, track, soccer, everything, and I was able to handle all of those things, and I needed, but there was I didn't fit with baseball. I didn't fit, and where I come from, I loved martial arts. I loved martial arts. I wanted to do something more physical like gymnastics, but gymnastics wasn't something you do as a boy in Paris, Texas. So that was, they just kind of directed me away from, and then I think the Paris Community Theater was putting up this kids play or play cast by kids, and she put me in it, and then we did a Christmas show, and then the junior college did Music Man, and you just kind of gravitated, and I in high school, and I never had a place, I was an outsider. I never felt like I fit in anywhere.
But you weren't necessarily unpopular, I'm sure. It's not like you had enemies. You just didn't have that little tight little package.
No. And I didn't know who I was or what group I fit in, or, and at that age you want to fit in. You want a sense of belonging. And it wasn't until high school that I found the theater. And
And I feel like as a damn Yankee, you know what I mean? As a New Yorker, like my picture of a place like Paris, Texas, growing up in either the 70s, 80s, I'm assuming somewhere in that range. Like, I mean, I obviously see this like very small, conservative, Christian, like tight-knit white community where you don't, this doesn't cross with this, and this doesn't. Everything has a place.
I tell you what,
and
man,
is it a kind of an accurate portrayal in my mind, or is there?
Strangely enough, your assumption would be correct, but the actuality of it is that I went to school with I would even say predominantly black.
Really?
Yeah, and
interesting.
And from my recollection, I mean, I was in classes it was very mixed. So a predominantly, I would, maybe not predominantly, but pretty
it was
even.
Healthy. Yeah. It was.
And I was exposed to, I mean, when I was in elementary school, Teresa, I think her name was Teresa Parks, would spin us all on the merry-go-round. So there would be like 7 of us, and this hefty girl that Teresa Parks.
I love that you remember her name.
I don't know why.
That's great.
And she would spin us, and I loved her. And there was this guy named Marcus who was a good friend of mine, and so I was introduced to ethnicities, and I went to a public school, and it was, I was very fortunate with that. I tell you what, man, we can get, I wouldn't mind talking gritty, but once I got into high school and I had an identity and I had a sense of self in theater, and I had there was no understanding of who, I don't know. There wasn't humans were humans.
Right.
My parents didn't raise me to judge people.
Sure.
And it wasn't until something happened, and I'm just going to say this, because it kind of weighs on me to this day, and I've forgiven myself, but I was in this class it was pre-algebra, and they always put me in remedial classes because I would score poorly on assessment tests.
Gotcha.
But then I would get encouraged by, history of Henry VIII, and I would do like a 5-page paper just because
because you were probably interested in the stories.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
And they didn't know how to treat my ADD. They didn't know how to. I was one of those people that needed to be challenged.
Right? Absolutely.
So I'd place poorly on those tests and be put into remedial classes, but then excel outside of the program that they gave me.
Right.
Then they would take notice, and then I would be put into a higher level class.
Sure. Right.
And then the next year, another assessment test would put me back down.
Yeah. Right. So you were constantly getting thrown forward and then backwards and then forward and backwards.
Yeah. And this, I remember in my pre-algebra class, and this girl named Tina, she and I were really good friends, I think, in like elementary school or junior high, but something happened, a shift in the social consciousness of junior high to high school.
Like those teenage years, yeah.
Yeah, suddenly we became them and us.
Right.
And
you mean black kids and white kids.
Yeah, there's this really hot girl named Sasha. And she was a mixed girl, but she had this. She dared people to call her the hussy or whatever. But she was one of my best friends too, and lived down the street. And Anyway, so I've decided that I'm just gonna, because I can't hold back anymore. I can't hold. I see what's happening in the world, and people need to fucking love each other, man.
Absolutely.
And there's something that happens in our insecurities that if we don't evolve past those things,
The tribe mentality. We have to remove tribe mentality from our beings. And the problem with that is that people then fear that removing tribe mentality removes pride. And I feel like you can have both simultaneously, and people don't understand that because we don't live in a world of gray. We live in a world of harsh black and harsh white extremes. And it's interesting that you say that you discovered around that. You felt like at that time you felt the shift. I feel like it's so weird. I feel like it has to be a learned behavior. And I feel like, because I definitely know definitively some kids who grew up racist where I'm from. I also grew up in a very mixed area. And like literally the town I grew up in on Long Island is called Deer Park. The next town over is called Wyandanch, and of course I learned really young that it was labeled Crime Danch because it's where the black people lived. Do you know what I mean? And it's a behavior that's taught. And my school itself was extremely mixed. And I had friends I can't think of an ethnicity that wasn't represented in my school, at least in some small format, from Asian to Middle Eastern to Latin and Black. I mean, everybody that I can honestly think of was there and represented. But I feel like something in that age, whether it's the media that you start to learn, maybe it's like you start actually hearing lyrics to music that maybe you've never heard before. Maybe you start watching different types of television. I think that even if you don't feel like you have hate in your heart, or, if you don't feel like you're racist or whatever, I feel like just by becoming exposed to it, it sort of just manifests itself in you. And I'll never forget, like, I also grew up in a home that was very tolerant for the most part. My mom dated a guy once who was a real avid racist, and I heard him throw the N-word around a lot. I literally saw him get into fights with black people in parking lots of grocery stores just because, you know what I mean? And luckily the writing was on the wall and he didn't last. With the exception of him, we were not raised to be intolerant by any means, which, but I'll never forget, being 15, 14 maybe, getting jumped at the underpass, getting my bike stolen and screaming the N-word as loud as I could at these dudes, because that was the way that that was how I had to express my anger and hatred for the moment. And I wanted to do whatever I can to make them seem like awful people because I felt wronged. And again, it's like, I still to this day, I strongly believe that I don't have hate in my heart, and I could be wrong. I'm sure there's something systemically in me that sees some that, but there's something about that age range, man.
Yeah. And I think, I don't remember my family being anything but welcoming and loving but inevitably, my church was pretty much all white. I don't remember anybody in that church being any other color than white.
Right.
This girl came into, and like I said, we were friends, it seemed like in junior high, elementary school, and then in high school. I was sitting on her desk, and I was talking to this girl, Sasha, and she came in and just started yelling at me. This girl, I think her name was Tina or Trina. She came in just yelling at me and snapping her fingers and shaking her head and just not, I don't know what she called me any names, but maybe she did, but whatever it was roused in me this mechanism that said, you know what? I wouldn't, if you'd come in here and just said, do you mind getting off my desk? Then I would have done that fine.
Right.
No problem. It's your space. Got it. But you didn't have to be such an N-word about it. And I said it as loud as I possibly could.
Right.
And I saw these tears and she was twice my size.
Right.
And I saw these tears well up in her eyes, and I felt so much guilt and sadness. Now, she as a person shouldn't have come in at me like that, but me as a person, that was uncalled for.
And I also do feel like a lot of it does come from that age. At that age, like you want to test boundaries, and you don't, at least I could say for myself, like I didn't have the wherewithal to understand the limitations of, of the power of words or anything. I feel like it's the same reason why like kids scratch ass into, you know what I mean, into their desk. Like it's like
Right.
the youngest thing you could do is like, oh, I'm gonna write I'm gonna write F into this desk just because I think it's funny.
Right.
So it says fuck on there, you know, like
Exactly.
And I feel like and it's just unfortunate that as the privileged white men that we are giving this tool that is like the fucking worst thing that could be possibly given, and you're given it at that age, like it's a weird coming of age thing, and I feel like it happens a lot around that age. I also feel like that was around the age where I noticed the shift, like as well. Like I noticed the us versus them. I noticed some people that I was hanging out with becoming a little bit more intolerant. Mm-hmm. I wonder if it's that we noticed people changing, or if we were just finally noticing it. It could be that we just, you're too young to realize it. Maybe too.
I don't know. I unfortunately heard that word and I used it.
Right.
Of course. And I saw in the reflection in her eyes in that moment was our junior high, our elementary, our childhood being what's a really good word for it? Just de-innocence, it's
eviscerated.
It's eviscerated. Yeah. And it was, and I think I might have, I know I did say I was sorry to her, but to the day I maybe until right now, I'm just always going to say I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, and I feel like that's the difference too, is like that the self-awareness, that guilt. Do you know what I mean? Like if you can carry that with you, then I feel like that's very telling. About a person's nature. But it's interesting too that you have such a vivid memory of this scenario too, because like I have a fuzzy memory. I remember who I was with. I remember this, the basics of it. But moving past it a little bit, did that sort of culture that you grew up in, like that, noticing that it was them, us versus them, like did that manifest itself in any other ways in you as far as like being in high school together? Did you find separation? And
I had I wanted to have as I had a variety of different friends,
right?
No, I think, well, in college there was one black girl that went to my college, which I thought was
so you went to a very this was the private Christian college
in Arkansas.
It's interesting too. I feel like that is a big part of it. You mentioned earlier that there was no black people in your white church, and I bet you there was no white people in the black church down there. It's incredible how even in non-segregated towns, religion is segregated. And as somebody who I'm admittedly not very religious, though I did grow up very religious, I never really like analyzed that in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, and I wonder if it's simply just the style of
it is
of
what it
praise.
is.
And
when I wasn't going to school in Arkansas, we went out into another community, and there was this white church on a old, literally white church. So it was like like wooden white panels with wooden steeple,
like the thing that you see in Little House on the Prairie, like the really old school fashion.
And we went to this church. It was a what they call a black church, I guess, and it was the best time of my life. Yeah, singing praises and dancing and jumping and doing all that.
I'm not
stuff.
Gonna lie to you. When the very first black church I went to was I moved to Florida for a little while. I lived in Florida, and I went to like a Southern Baptist black church in Florida. Yeah. And I was just like, well, shit, maybe I'd still be religious if this was how.
It's a good time.
Because it's just exactly that. It's like. I feel like a lot of people use that, like the term the spirit. They're like, oh, the spirit's in this church. And I'm like, all right, I feel that spirit. I get it. Even if I'm not.
And it's a willingness to just be free when you have, I think the white culture has such a structure around it. And there's you can't go outside of that. It's like I was saying,
everything has a place. Everything is very sort of meticulous and everything. And also I feel like there's a big facade as well on a lot of that. Yeah.
There is this undercurrent of truth that is repressed and people can't be who they are and you have to keep up with the Joneses. Right. I want to get to talking about ridding ourselves of tribe and embracing other cultures. And I think this is incredibly vital, and I think this is probably going to be one of my big talking points or my big focus points is I do this speech when I talk to at different festivals and stuff, not necessarily film festivals, but art festivals and music festivals and things like that, or schools. And or universities. And
I don't mean to cut you off really quickly. Are you? I just didn't know this. Are you like a public speaker as well?
Well, I do public speaking.
Is it mostly industry related though, where they invite you because of your work?
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I didn't want to make sure there wasn't something I was missing here.
No. It's I thought about kind of adding that to the spectrum,
right.
but I don't know. I love talking about cultures and things like that, but really it was Embrace the Serpent that really brought a full-on awareness, and then
which a lot of that movie is about this topic necessarily.
Exactly.
It's sort of about the
and
combining of
and being able to have a platform now in which people do listen. And my experience there, and my experience in my childhood, and my experience with my black friends and brothers and sisters, and people that I love and respect, and Latin communities, and there is such a rich fucking culture available to us here in the States, like no other country.
Really
that if we don't embrace it and utilize it, then we're screwed.
Right.
Because it's everything that America wants to be.
Right. Well, it's the argument of like, America's a melting pot, when in actuality, unfortunately, it's not. It should be. Right now, it's like a salad, and everything
and it's not chopped and tossed.
No, not at all. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I agree wholeheartely, especially as like, when you're the sort of like, don't really even know where you come from white guy. Hell, you know what? I'd love to, experience a little bit of this very historic culture of something that's out of whatever I am, and be able to relish in it and be able to kind of consume it.
Let me see myself in that, and how I can be empowered by that.
And also there's a show, I know this is kind of a weird jump, but there's a show, I want to say it was called Inside Man. And or
it's a movie, isn't it?
It is, but it was also a television show. Okay. It's by Morgan Spurlock. I also may be confusing it with 30 Days, but honestly, I think they're both the exact same premise. Okay. And essentially, what the premise... Oh, yeah, I'm remembering now. Okay, 30 Days was essentially... It was a social experiment, really, where he would take, the one that I remember the most was the very conservative, religious Texan cowboy, and he moved him in with a gay couple in San Francisco for 30 days. And he did this multiple times. He literally took a Minuteman, like the guy who guards the border, and he let him live with an undocumented family in Southern California for 30 days. And inevitably, every single time, the show never ended with people going, well, I believe what I believe and you believe what I believe. Never.
It's
I
impossible.
misspoke there, but you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right.
It always ended with enlightenment. It always ended with acceptance, and both directions too. It wasn't always just like, well, there were certain times where, for example, the gay couple in San Francisco was like, well, you know what? I thought all cowboys were, unaccepting assholes. And so there's something to be learned everywhere. And I feel like what you're saying is about that mixing of the culture is just fucking crucial.
Imagine a world where Columbus and the Spanish and the Catholic Church had come over to South America and looked at all of those various cultures and said, how can we together raise our consciousness?
Right, of course.
But rather they stripped them of their languages. They told them that they were pagans, or they were not human.
Right. Yeah.
In order to enter the kingdom of heaven, you had to speak Spanish.
Right. Yeah.
Here, speak English.
Right.
Ultimately, and then they did the same thing to the Native Americans here, annihilated them. What kind of world would we be now if we had gone to Africa and said, hey, we have, I know that you have, labor issues over here. We have an opportunity to provide work and opportunity for employment.
Sure.
Over here, and you'll be treated well. You'll get employment. We will all be able to grow together. Yeah. Because I tell you what, man, I look at if I'm going to generalize the laziness of the white man in America and the work ethic of somebody who has to struggle,
right? Who has to literally fight every single step. Something as simple as like just being able to get a job, not getting a job,
Right.
being allowed to get a job. I mean, literally every step.
Limitations promote innovation. You have to be innovative.
Yeah, that's
if you are limited.
It's interesting. I can apply that to art. I mean, that's literally, I always talk about
Indie film.
Yeah, it was about indie film. Like when you don't have the money or you don't have the access, you have to figure something out.
Right.
I mean,
And I feel like, you know, I think we can only improve by encouraging DACA, encouraging people to excel, and empowering people. And you know what, man? It's just so obvious to me that education is the key to
absolutely
everything.
Yeah.
And because I'm not a politician, I'm not a highly educated human being. I didn't go get my master's in anything, but I read. And I know that education is the key to everything. And there has to be corruption because that is an obvious answer to our solutions.
Right.
And there has to be somewhere this oppression that doesn't want that to happen.
Of course.
And so therefore it doesn't, because
and also, I mean, like I've always touted that there's never been a time in human history where power hasn't led to corruption. Like there's never a time where a man in power hasn't used that power for his own good and not the good of the people. Like it just, I know that we want to pretend like even in a perfect world where Bernie Sanders ended up being president or whatever, you know, obviously it's inevitable, unfortunately. What's the saying? Absolute
power is absolute corruption.
Or yeah.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
There you go. And unfortunately, that's just sort of the way it is. I feel like that's where religion comes from. That's where a lot of, you know, the quote white culture and the Western culture comes from, really. Yeah. But I don't know, your utopia of what if it had been different in the past is something that's really fascinating to think about, and it's unfortunately an answer we will never get.
Right. But it's if we admit our faults, if we admit our wrongs, which they just want to brush under the rug, then we can change that part of humanity.
Which is why education is so important, and a realistic education, a fact-based, realistic education.
Admittance of truth.
Yeah, admittance of truth. Wow, yeah. It sounds so obvious.
Yeah. That's why to me
God.
I just feel like it's all just wrong.
Yeah. So not to make this a sad pitch to promotion, but I'm just curious because it does sort of play into it. Your movie, the aforementioned Embrace of the Serpent, I mean, it touches upon this a little bit. I'm curious how you ended up in that role, where that came from, because it's not an American-made film. Where is it? South American?
Yeah, Colombia.
Colombia, right. Yeah. I didn't want to get the country wrong. But how did that come about? Was that something that was discovered here in LA?
Yeah, well, they were looking for an American actor, and I happened to look like Richard Evans Schultz, so Schultes. And so
is this based on a true story?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I wasn't familiar with that.
He's considered the father of ethnobotany. I had shot this film called Avenged. The producer on that film, Jason Gravitz, had suggested, a producer in Colombia reached out to him. They had worked together and said, who are your top 5 actors that you would consider working with again that
could fit this.
Could handle, you know, going to the Amazon jungle and living for 2 months. And my name came up in the basket, and I looked so much similar to this, and I read the script, and I thought everything in my life was preparing me to play this role.
Wow.
And sure enough,
in what way?
Boy Scouts.
Oh, right, sure.
Canoeing and rowing in the Ozarks, and teaching waterfront, and getting, and then just being able to have the stamina to sustain, and the desire of adventure, and those short stories that I used to write out. It would take me. It's those, all of those stories were me putting into the future what I wanted to be, and who I wanted to be, and where I wanted to go. Because literally, I could have written this adventure in the Amazon, right, when I was a kid. You know?
And then here you were as an adult discovering it. Essentially, you're sort of falling on your lap. That's fantastic. I mean, I'm curious as to how much of the cast of that movie is local. Specifically, pretty much everything that takes place in the tribe is stunning. It's beautiful. It's also so incredibly authentic seeming, and I don't know is how much of that is.
We shot everything on location. We shot everything in there's 4 actors in the movie.
Okay.
4
primary principals.
Myself, the other the explorer, the German explorer,
the skinnier guy with the long scraggly beard,
Jan Bevut, and who's incredible and was wonderful to work with, and then the padre that they visit one of the children's the school for boys,
right?
And then the guy who played the Messiah. Those were the 4 actors. Everybody else was either native or
really?
Wow. Yeah.
So there was almost some documentary style elements.
Yeah. And we had to be blessed by a shaman to come in to film there.
What is that culture? I'm sorry, I'm ignorant. I don't know.
No, sure. I mean, that's why I was so happy to be a part of it, because I was able to learn it myself.
Right. Yeah.
The language that I spoke primarily was called Witoto.
Witoto?
Yeah, which is a dying language. I think there's probably like 75 people in the world that speak it now.
Wow.
And my traveling companion, Antonio, he's one of the last remaining members of that tribe, but he speaks Witoto, a couple other indigenous languages, Portuguese and Spanish. And then so there's the Wanano tribe. There's a couple of different tribes that are represented in the film. And then Nilbio, who played the younger of the Karamkatis, is a farmer in one of the
communities,
villages,
right,
one of the villages. But anyway, man, this film, I mean, it was just a confirmation for me,
right.
And I got to travel the world with it. I mean, seeing it at Cannes for the first time with my co-stars and with production.
I can only imagine the joy that brings, and the fulfillment, the emotional fulfillment. I mean,
I literally said, man, I was like, I'm done. How can I ever?
How do you mind? I know we're gonna hop around a little bit, but I'm just curious. Like, from what I remember from when we had met, I mean, you're working, but we're both, like you said earlier, you just recently found out that you can that this is an achievable thing. Like, I mean, how long had you been out here, and sort of have you been finding yourself in that way? Have you been struggling? Like, how long are you down here sort of before this sort of happened and you sort of had this sort of fulfillment?
I say that I've been a professional actor for 20 years, theater in New York, and then going back to New York, I'd done a one-man show. Going back to my father, there's a long story there, but
another episode, maybe
another episode.
Okay,
possibly.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm interested. Yeah,
it's my one-man show, and how going back to my father's understanding of who I was in this world and him understanding it. But yeah, there's 20 years, and then I've been asked in multiple interviews, when did you think you got a break, or what was your big break, or is this a big break for you? And
I hate that term. It drives me crazy.
It's so, people, and what I realize is, and this is a kind of a pet peeve of mine, is somebody will say something about an actor, whatever happened to this actor? Well, more than likely that actor made the decision that I don't want to do this anymore.
Sure.
I want to go, and there's a lot of them that are working off Broadway theater, and they're just, I've made my buck, I'm just going to go and I'm going to do something I love.
Right.
And then Laurie Metcalf, I think, is that way. She's way under the radar, but she's brilliant, and she does a lot of off Broadway.
Right. Yeah.
Of course, she's got some stuff coming out now, but I think that's, in terms of myself, man, it's peaks and valleys and ups and downs, and that's what I love about it. But it's also very, trying. But I don't know what I'm going to be on Castle Rock, the Stephen King.
Oh, nice.
Stephen King and J.J. Abrams series in Hulu. And
congrats on that.
Yeah,
when does that start?
Next year.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm just in the first season.
Nice.
First episode.
Right.
or one of the first episodes. I don't know.
Something
really
early on.
Anyway,
Right, yeah.
It's very under.
Right, yeah.
I don't even know what story it is they're telling. But it's going to be amazing. You I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow, but I guarantee you I'll get an email that changes my day.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Of course, yeah.
And it's all an adventure, man. Every scene you do is a journey.
Yeah.
Every day you live is a journey. Everything, and to hurry or want to like do this, which I'm grasping at air.
Sure.
It's why live that way?
Right.
Why not just know that you're doing the right thing?
Well, I mean, that's a very big, easier said than
took
done.
me 20 years to be able to say it.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I struggle with that literally daily, of course. And I'm in a spot now where, I'm like, I've never really looked to the future. That's kind of how I've always been. And it wasn't until 33 years old or so that it started being like, well, like, should I look to the, and I started second guessing my, like, it'll happen how it happens nature. And, you have to, I have to learn how to suppress that, of course, and like enjoy the day and enjoy,
everything
whatever it is.
falls into place.
Right.
It so does.
Also, I feel like, I'm not sure what the age difference is here. I feel like you're just slightly older than I am. I feel
just
like
turned 41.
Gotcha. So I'm 34, and I feel like, I felt like I found myself 4 years ago, and before that, I felt like I found myself 4 years before that, and now I feel like I'm finding myself again. Like it's so that's never
every
gonna
7
go
years
away.
we become a completely different physical component of ourselves.
Oh, I like why 7 years? Why
Because that's when our cells regenerate.
Oh, wait, is that like a scientific thing?
Scientific fact. All your cells regenerate every 7 years.
I did not know that.
So
That's
you literally
fascinating.
become
so you
a
literally
different
are
person.
a different person
Physically.
than you were.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's great.
So
So
we can look it up. But
So in 7 years, I could tell my girl, like, listen, you're not even the person who I met.
well, hopefully, and the idea is that you grow together,
right? Yeah,
and you hope for that, and people do, and I think that's what we all aspire to. I don't know, man. It's we just it's all a journey, and as artists, I mean, we're very fortunate because we're always asking ourselves questions.
Right.
We're always questioning ourselves, questioning our beliefs. I
feel
wish
like
everyone
being
would
introspective
just
is so crucial, and it's such a hard thing for so many people to do.
because it's a scary place in there sometimes.
It's a very scary place there. Also, it's just hard. And getting back to what we were talking about earlier about the tribe mentality, it's just hard to be honest with yourself. Like, it's very hard for a lot of people to be honest with yourself. Why do I think the way that I think?
Why is it hard for people to be honest with themselves?
Fear.
They're not forced to.
Right.
And only until, I was forced to. I think anyone that is a minority to a large degree. What's your background? Are you?
Unfortunately, I don't really know.
You don't know? Okay.
We know that there's German, Irish, English, likely Italian, but maybe not. I don't really have a relationship with my father at all. And so his background is very fuzzy. Some people say that he's full-blooded Italian, but that's really, nobody really knows. So unfortunately, I don't know exactly.
Right.
But which is why I was saying earlier why I would relish the idea of like getting to explore a culture that has a historic, that has a storied history, that's the
It's
thing.
crazy, man. There was a church in Mattu, Colombia, where I spent most of my time. There was a church, and every day at 5, that bell would ring, and everybody, for me, it was a reminder of the history,
right,
of the oppression, of the genocide that happened there, and I can't for the life of me understand why that church is still there. And they have this white Jesus that's coming up over this hill, and then the indigenous people are there. And then they had to change the concept of the dove to a parakeet because the indigenous people didn't know what a dove was. So when they were reading the Bible to them, they were like, I can't imagine what a dove is. So they had to change it to a parakeet.
Just to understand it.
Certain symbols in the Bible they changed to encourage them to understand.
Right. So I not to jump too far back here, but just because we've sort of circled, you clearly grew up in a very religious community. you went to a private Christian college. Like, have you been a man of faith, or were you ever, or are you still?
I believe that there is certainly a higher good.
Right.
I don't believe that there's necessarily, and as an observer and interpreter of the human condition, you understand that where we are in this existence is that there's always something to gain and there's always something to lose.
Absolutely.
Inevitably, we exist that way as humans, right? But at the core of us, at that meditative, higher peace,
Sure.
all is okay.
Right.
So, and that
The
I
golden
think
nugget,
is
is
where
that what you called it?
that's yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
that's what I call it, and that is your truth.
Right.
And if we can just, anytime I get hot-headed or like I start, feeling, anxiety or tension or something's not going my way, I take myself and I imagine myself going up above the atmosphere into the sky and up above that into the universe and far, 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 far until I become absolutely nothing and a speck and realize that this time that you and I are speaking right now doesn't even really exist in the grand scheme of
course.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
So why spend any of that time being antagonistic or in opposition?
Man. Oh man, yeah. It couldn't be more obvious, yet so wholly complicated.
Yes,
we really are nothing. That's the lesson here. The lesson we learned is we are nothing. Just be nice.
Yeah, but light shines so much further than that darkness.
Absolutely.
So you can cover the world with your light.
Right.
But
yeah, I've always been taught too that it really takes a lot of effort to be an asshole. You know what I mean?
It does.
It takes a lot of effort to be an asshole. And I know because I've been an asshole for a long time. And I'm exhausted. Wow.
Why would you say you're an asshole?
Because of what I spoke about earlier, is when I was young, I realized I needed to get reactions in order to get anything. You know what I mean? And I feel like it comes from that being an outsider. And then I think in my 20s, I discovered I had a power and I didn't use that power. With that power came responsibility and I didn't use it properly. And you know what I mean? It's a part of my archetype. I've been working on it for a long time, of course, but I definitely haven't always handled situations the best way. And, I'm sort of that person that people tend to label like, oh, the lovable asshole. Like he's always gonna tell you exactly what's on his mind. And I'm like, I like that, but also it sounds
even
like
when
it
it's
sounds
not
like
asked for.
Yeah. And also it also sounds like you're sort of telling me to stop that. So but Brionne, this was an absolutely fantastic conversation. There's still a lot more about you that I want to learn.
Totally.
I
know it already, but there's a lot more about you I want to learn. So.
I'd love it if you come back. Will you come back again sometime soon?
Yeah.
For the business, how do people how do people watch the movie?
They can IMDb me, Brionne Davis, Brionne Davas. Then you can see a variety of stuff up there. But I will say, Embrace the Serpent, even if I wasn't in it, is one of the best movies ever made.
Beautiful.
It's so beautiful. That's on Amazon. That's on iTunes. It's on Amazon Prime still.
Right.
And if you download or if you buy the Blu-ray copy, there's a excerpt interview by me that's really, really great. And then some behind the scenes footage.
Oh, nice. So there's extended content online as well. So if you buy the Blu-ray version of it, instead of just the basic version is.
Right.
So I urge everybody to do that because I'm sure that the behind the scenes stuff, especially, just the location alone of that project is fascinating. And the people, so that's fantastic. And what about social media? Do you do social media?
I do everything Brionne Davis.
He says so relucantly. I do. It's just your name at Brionne Davis.
At Brionne Davis, yeah. Instagram and Twitter, and I have a Facebook pro page that you can hang out.
Fantastic.
At. It's a necessary evil, I think.
Yeah, and it's important. It's it's a way that we can extend a conversation like this as far as we can, or conversations like this that other people are having. It's definitely a necessity tool.
I'm happy to end on that, but I just want to say, and I think that this is going to be what with people like you and moving forward, it's time we stop giving our politicians any attention, and we should be out in front of prisons, and we should be opposing the treatment of the way the prison system
Inmates,
is ran.
yeah.
I think that we should be promoting education. I think we should be moving forward instead of fighting against, because that system up there is obviously mishandled and misdirected. And I think if we take the power back into our own hands and see the injustices, and I think the prison system is the main. It's slavery, man. And I think that once we start focusing our attention on that and doing something about it, and taking the corruption and the corporatism out of politics, that's what has to happen.
And it has to be done with action, not just words.
Right.
It has to be bodies. It has to be
Phone
votes.
calls.
It has to be phone calls. It has to actually be work.
Right.
It has to be a type of physical work, because, and I'm sure that you and I are both guilty of it as well. I mean, our really well conceived, witty tweet about whatever was happening that day might have made one person go, yeah, I agree. But at the end of the day, how much are we helping if we're not there? So
I've got a cousin that I love, man, and he I'm not changing his mind.
Right. Of course.
So,
of course.
of
course. Well, I mirror those opinions wholeheartedly, and I fully endorse that statement. Please, listeners, if you've enjoyed this conversation, share this with a friend of yours. Follow Brionne. Pass the word along. If you're listening on iTunes, please throw us a rating. 5-star rating is incredibly important. Throw us a review. Be honest. Tell us what you think of the show. Tell us what you think of our guests. What you think we can do better. If there's something that you want to talk about, something that you want to hear about, if there's a person that you'd like me to talk with, please let me know. As always, follow @ElaboratePod for all things Elaborate, and @It'sDragonWagon for all things Dragon Wagon Radio. Thank you so much for listening. Be nice to each other. Listen to Brionne's words. Take them to heart. I think they're incredibly important, especially in the climate that we're currently living in. Brionne, thank you so much for coming, man. I love you.
Love you too, man.
You guys, you don't get it. I'm sitting here. He's just so handsome. He's got this face and this beard, and his name is Matt Kessler. Matt, you have a podcast.
I do have a podcast. It is called Too Many Records. It is an extension of a YouTube show that existed already called Too Many Records. And it's because I have a lot of freaking records.
What's a lot of records?
I have about 1,500 vinyl LPs, and it's growing by the day.
That's a lot of records.
Yeah, so on the show, I talk about records. I nerd out about music with people, and it's a real good time. So I hope you'll listen if you like tunes.
How do we listen?
You go to iTunes or Stitcher, and you can download it there, or go to toomanyrecords.net.
I have an old Hall & Oates record I'd like to sell you.
Nope.
It's Dragon Wagon.